Member for Nelson Creston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I really want to thank the member from Victoria Swan Lake. This is an issue that's been going on for 10 years, and the member was able to dig back in his memory and pull forward many stories of what's been going on for the last 10 years around this issue in private post-secondary education and the lack of protection for students and the lack of regulation that happened as a result of this government's decision over 10 years ago. And being able to pull forward all that information and share it with all of us here in this House right now is a real tribute to his work when he previously had the file as a critic for advanced education. I find Bill 7 a step in the right direction. I'm pleased to see it finally come forward. I would have liked to have seen it come forward a long time ago. I would have even have liked for this government to have debated, at least debated, my colleague from Victoria Swan Lake's bill in 2007, or the bill that I put forward in 2011 that addresses this and so much more of what's not, but should be, in this bill, Mr. Speaker. And that's because members on this side of the House, they saw a problem happening years ago. They warned the government. They offered ideas on how to solve the problem, which is interesting because I remember in January of this year, Mr. Speaker, just before we all came back to the legislature, the Premier was in the news saying that the NDP has no ideas. And here, her government is putting forward legislation that pulls directly from the ideas that we've put forward in this House. So I'm guessing that we certainly do have ideas. We actually have a lot of ideas. I had a good time that day tweeting about many of them, Honourable Speaker, and offering them up to the Premier for her to use at her leisure. We would love to share them in the spirit of collaboration in this House. And I'm glad that she at least took one, well, part of one. Because part of the problem with this bill is that it doesn't address some of the key areas where we've seen students have considerable number of complaints where they're not getting the protection that they need and that we should be establishing in this province so that we don't see consulates from China or from India, from other parts of the world, from Korea, issuing complaints and warnings about studying here in British Columbia and therefore weakening our system. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I have spoken over the years to many private post-secondary operators, have several in my constituency, and they all agree that we need better regulation because a few bad apples were ruining it for everybody else. And so we start to see a step in the right direction here with Bill 7, but we don't see regulation of the English language learning schools, Mr. Speaker, and of course they number by the hundreds in BC, and there is just no regulation of them whatsoever. And so no surprise, we have seen hundreds of complaints, many of them coming directly to our community offices in our constituencies. And there is nothing we can do for these students. Nothing we can do except offer them a number for a lawyer, and that's not good enough, and that's not good enough for British Columbia, and that's not good enough for our post-secondary sector, and that's not good enough for students, Honourable Speaker. So I'm hoping that we can put forward some amendments and that the other members opposite will agree with those amendments and see them in the spirit of collaboration as strengthening this bill for the betterment of the sector, for the betterment of students. And some of the responses to date, though, from this government have been woefully inadequate, which is, like I said, this bill's a step in the right direction, but again, it's not fully where we need to be going. It's not adequate. A previous attempt in addressing the problems in private post-secondary and some of the complaints that students were putting forward was the EQA, the quality assurance brand that this government developed and attempted to market it. Now, Mr. Speaker, it never fails that whenever there's a problem that requires regulation of the private sector, of some of the people who have given large donations to the Liberal Party, it never fails that they come up with the answer of, we'll just do some marketing. We'll just do some education. But what's really needed is regulation. And it's taken them how many years, Mr. Speaker? It's taken them at least 7 years. 7 years since the EQA was established to recognize that that wasn't good enough. You can't just market your way out of a problem. You actually have a duty, a responsibility in this House to act. And I'm glad to see that they finally learned that and they're taking a step in the right direction today. And it's almost, it's almost a little bit of a told you so moment for us here on the NDP benches, Mr. Speaker, because we've been bringing these stories to the House repeatedly for over a decade. And I remember working with students who were going to a university, institution that had the university title in its name, run by Emanada. Emanada had donated over $15,000 to the BC Liberal Party. So they probably appreciated when an email was leaked out of a minister's office right into their hands, warning them of an investigation that a journalist was covering on the way in which students were not being well treated and well respected by their institution, that there were problems at that institution. And that example, Mr. Speaker, goes to show why it's taken the Liberals so long to get here, that it wasn't just a matter of ideology way back when in 2002 and 2003, that it was how this government over and over and over again, Mr. Speaker, makes sure that they put their rich friends, their donors' interests ahead of everything else, ahead of student protection, ahead of a strong post-secondary sector that sees a well-balanced private sector that's well-regulated, that many in that sector ask for those types of regulations. And that is never acceptable, Honourable Speaker. So like I said, I'm glad that the government has finally woken up to the realities that's been going on for over a decade, and they are finally attempting to truly remedy the problem. But they haven't fully done so, Honourable Speaker. They haven't fully done so. And so, like I said, I hope that they will respond in the spirit of collaboration favorably to some of the amendments that we're going to be put forward that will ultimately round out this piece of legislation and give British Columbia the regulations and students the protection that they need. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to put my remarks on the record today and look forward to the remainder of the debate.